Good day, everybody. My name is Manisha Thomas, and it is my pleasure today to be facilitating this ECOSOC side event on system-wide change for greater accountability to people affected by crisis. I'm going to first give you a few instructions on how to use the captions, and I encourage all of you to also use the chat and Q&A functions in Zoom. I see many of you have already started, but please do introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from and who you're working with. We will also be really encouraging you to enjoy the event really by participating through asking questions in the Q&A and chat. So with that, it is my pleasure to really, again, welcome you to this event that is being organized on behalf of the Interagency Standing Committee Task Force 2 on Accountability to Affected People, or AAP. And the co-chairs of that task force are IFRC, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, WFP, the World Food Program, and the CHS Alliance. We've also got a number of contributors to the event, including CARE International, OCHA, MOPAN, I will tell you the full name of that later on, the START Network, and UNFPA, in addition to the co-chairs of IFRC, CHS Alliance, and WFP. And we are very pleased that the funding for this event today has been provided by USAID. So really today, I mean, many of you will have joined us for several of the events that the predecessor to the IASC Task Force on IASC Task Force 2 on AAP, its predecessor Results Group 2, I believe it was, on AAP. We've done a number of events around the work that Results Group was doing. And this is very much sort of a transition into the new task force and some of the work that it will be doing over the coming years. So this event is really a great opportunity to be talking first and foremost about the theory of change that the IASC has developed on accountability to affected people, which is really about having accountable and enhanced leadership that's supported by an inclusive system and architecture that has quality resourcing available, will be able to strengthen accountability to affected populations. And as a result of that theory of change, today's event is structured around those three key areas and three actions that we need. So the accountable and enhanced leadership, that's supported by an inclusive system and architecture. That's the second part of our session today. And the third one is going to be about quality resourcing being made available. So that structure is there, and we will be using a number of polls throughout the event to also hear your views and your feedback. If you don't have the latest version of Zoom, you may wish to update your version because you may not be able to access the polls. So that's just a warning. You don't have to update to the latest version of Zoom, but if you would like to be able to participate in the polls, you may need to do that. So you may want to just do that quickly as I continue the introduction piece. I think what has really come out is that we are all talking about accountability to affected people in terms of how it is a non-negotiable. It is really something that we should be doing, but at the same time, we're not making as much progress as we really would like to be doing, or that we should be doing, given that we really talk about putting people at the center. And I know that when you all registered, many of you talked about, answered the question that was in the registration form about what is the greatest barrier to accountability to affected populations to overcome. And having gone through the 700 somewhat responses, I wanted to just flag a few of those because I think today's event is really going to start looking at where are some of those areas that we need to be really kind of making some more progress on. And I've kind of grouped them into, looking at people at the center, organizational issues, and more collective interagency elements too. So, and I think everything is overarched by the fact that the reason we do humanitarian response is due to political failures, often in terms of conflicts. less so necessarily in disasters, but I think overarching all of that is, the responsibility of states to find political solutions to conflicts is also one of those overarching elements that is a bit beyond our scope, but does affect our work. In terms of some of the challenges of really putting people at the center who have been affected by crisis, some of the barriers that were identified was we see them as beneficiaries as opposed to individuals who have agency, who have rights. We're not really enabling them to access the information to really put those rights into action. We're not involving those who are in hard to reach locations or that may not be easily accessible. So those who may be not have the mobility, maybe older persons have disabilities, may not be able to easily access the services that we as humanitarian organizations are providing. Really also, we're not necessarily including everyone of different ages and genders. So children are not often being included or their voices are not being heard. We also don't necessarily have accessible feedback and complaints mechanisms for those who may speak different languages, who may not be literate. We're also not good at really making sure that we're involving people throughout the program cycle. We're not involving them in identifying what the needs are, how to respond to those needs. We're also not good at making sure we get affected people to decision-making tables. So that community ownership of the way that we're doing responses is a big barrier there. And as organizations, we're not really listening or really hearing what affected people and affected communities are saying. So I think there is a huge problem that we have as organizations. There's also the lack of leadership commitment across organizations to accountability to affected populations. There's also this need for really changing the culture and mindset shift. We need a mindset shift in organizations to really make AAP central to what we do in terms of programming. There's also, it was raised, that we've got a lack of budget and a general culture towards AAP, that we're also focused too much on what donors want. So it's very much around the donor rules and regulations, as opposed to really listening to individuals who've been affected and communities that have been affected. But at the same time, there's often a lack of trust in those communities that was also flagged as a big barrier to be working on. This issue about power and racism and the way the system has been set up also came out. The lack of time that is invested in accountability to affected populations also came out as a barrier to address. Also, competition between organizations does not enable us to really put people at the center. We're constantly looking for money, trying to raise funds for our programs, and those are also barriers. So that need to really prioritize AAP internally and really change the culture of our organizations to make sure that we are prioritizing what affected people are saying are also barriers we need to overcome. And on the collective, more interagency approach to AAP. And so I think the system-wide change topic today is very key in terms of addressing some of those barriers that you identified. We don't have a coherent system-wide approach to AAP yet. We're too fragmented. We've made AAP perhaps too complex, and that's another barrier to overcome. There are too many systems. We're not trusting each other as agencies or organizations also to really be able to share information and have common collective approaches to AAP. And that interagency approach that we often talk about is still not there. So I just wanted to flag some of those as there are some of those big sort of barriers that are there. There were many more identified and more details, obviously, in your responses, and we'll make sure that the IASC Task Force has those moving ahead. The upcoming Humanitarian Accountability Report that the CHS Alliance is launching in September really does show us the evidence that about how organizations are meeting their commitments to the core humanitarian standard commitments. And as this slide shows, we've got a slide, just one second, it's going to come up in a minute. We're good at working better amongst ourselves and coordinating our work. However, commitment 4 in the core humanitarian standard on feedback from communities and commitment 5 on complaints and feedback mechanisms is where the humanitarian sector is still failing to meet the commitments it's made to people affected by crisis. So I think, that really sort of sets the frame of where we're going today. And I'm going to first turn over to Gloria Soma, who is the founder and director of the TT Foundation in South Sudan. And Gloria, I know you're going to be talking a bit about that upcoming Humanitarian Accountability Report that's being launched in September, but you're also going to share with us some of your experiences as a person who has lived experience of displacement and really dealing with organizations and how that's affected you. You know, how accountable were those organizations to you? Gloria, can I turn to you, please?
Thank you, Manisha. A good afternoon to everyone joining in this meeting today. Well, the Humanitarian Accountability Report 2022 aims to advance the collective efforts to create a more accountable aid system for the people who find themselves caught in crisis. I know what it's like not to be listened to. It's not until you have been ignored at the very time you most need help and support that you understand how it feels. The feeling is the same if you're ignored by a person, an organization, or a system which has more power than you. That's why I wholeheartedly welcome this report. The Humanitarian Accountability Report gives us a much needed honest look into how well the aid system is listening to and hearing the people who are experiencing the worst the world has to offer. The report helps us to face up to what happens when things go wrong. It also proposes actions that can be taken today to protect the rights and dignity of people in the most vulnerable of situations. As a 1990s Sudanese child of the Uganda refugee camps, I grew up in places with some of the highest mortality rates in the world at the time. Growing up, we were repeatedly attacked and displaced by rebels of the Lord's Resistance Army, yet unable to go home. We faced looting, violence, and many children were abducted. All in all, more than 100,000 people were killed and tens of thousands of children conscripted during those dark days. The sanctuary of the refugee camps and the kindness of many meant that I received shelter and help to survive. Yet, time after time, my family's needs were not listened to and we felt ignored by all sides. People planned what they gave us without asking about our needs. I understood they were doing what they could to deliver what they thought we needed, but when you have no choice, you feel powerless. Sometimes the system felt unfair to my family with inflexible criteria. Hidden vulnerabilities and invisible needs were just not recognized. This wasn't the last time I was confronted with the harsh realities of war. In July 2016, the fighting in my hometown of Juba reached my family home. Hundreds of women and children needed shelter and protection with nowhere else to go. So I opened up my family's compound to help. Moved by the experiences I had of rape, murder, abduction, and forced displacement, I set up a new NGO led by women for women and their children. Now I strive to lead an organization where we give space to everyone to make decisions on how they want to be assisted. Just as I would have wished when I faced displacement, uncertainty, violence, and loss, listening to the people who we help just made sense to me. Every day, I see this approach bringing about change and providing a better response. Together with those we serve, so much innovation is brought to the table by people that others have looked down on, underestimated, or marginalized. To me, this shows the importance of the aid system having a core standard that puts the dignity of affected people at the heart of response. Ultimately, to me, this is what accountability really is. Everyone, no matter their status, being able to speak truth to power and to hold those with authority to account for their actions. Thank you, Manisha. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. And I think that the fact that you really emphasize that when you've got no choice, you feel powerless, but that you've really been able to take that power back, I think is really incredible with the work that you're doing. But it really does emphasize, I think, the fact that we're talking a lot about AAP, but we haven't quite really put it into practice. And I think the upcoming Humanitarian Accountability Report really does emphasize that. I mean, in that sense, and thank you, Gloria, for joining us. I know you're not going to be able to stay the whole time, but it was great to have you there at the beginning with us. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn to Mervat, who is the chief of the Interagency Standing Committee Secretariat and also the head of a division whose name I forget in OCHA. I apologize, Mervat, I don't have that down. But I mean, I think, Mervat, that the fact that the IASC has come up with this theory of change on how to really put AAP into practice is excellent. So let me ask you, why is AAP critical to the Interagency Standing Committee?
Great. Thanks a million, Manisha, and good morning, good afternoon to colleagues online, and Gloria, lovely to see you online and to hear the sobering accounts from you. Again, I think this is a fantastic way to start a session like this. So it's absolutely a pleasure, of course, to be here and to welcome you all on behalf of the Interagency Standing Committee on to the side event on system-wide change for greater accountability to affected people. With increased attention and momentum on this issue, it is important that we are gathered today to consider practical ways to strengthen our collective accountability to the millions of the most vulnerable around the world that we are here to serve. And again, it was interesting, Manisha, in your introductory remarks, that one of the issues that you've highlighted is the challenges around collective action and collective accountability. And it's really important that we capitalize on the momentum that currently exists. It's really important that we come together to address these issues. And I'm absolutely honored, of course, to be joined today with a distinguished panel to really think about practical ways in which the system can do more to be more engaging and responsive to the voices of communities affected by crisis. And Gloria, again, examples from what you've experienced personally, again, shed really strong light on the fact that the system needs to do a lot more to be respectful, engaging, and responsive to what communities are saying and are asking for. So, but it's important also that as we do this, it's important to acknowledge that there's been a lot of effort, extraordinary effort and progress that has taken place over the years, including from many of you here at the side event, to ensure that communities are indeed at the center of humanitarian action. At the IASC, as you pointed out, Manisha, there is indeed renewed drive and a renewed commitment to build the necessary building blocks and to take the required action to strengthen the system's collective accountability to communities affected by crisis. This is, again, an opportunity and a momentum, as I was mentioning, that we really need to capitalize on. And this is derived because of a number of reasons. The reason why AAP has been prioritized, and there is renewed commitment from both the Emergency Relief Coordinator and the Interagency Standing Committee members themselves, who are the senior most officials within the system that are driving humanitarian action, is largely because there is no question that our primary responsibility ultimately is to people affected by crisis. They are the primary reason our institutions and programs exist. But at the same time, that comes with huge responsibility. Since the launch of the Grand Bargains Participation Revolution at the World Humanitarian Summit 6 years ago, we've moved a long way in acting upon our commitments to account for the system, so that the system is held to account by the people we work to serve, assist, and protect. And we have seen the impact we can have with the commitment of leadership at the global and the field level. And it's great to have, again, of course, Najat on the panel, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the amazing examples of how, with her leadership and working with the humanitarian country team on the ground and working with local partners and communities, it is possible to drive change. But likewise, also we have seen the impact we can have with the tenacity of frontline workers and community-led organization and the collaboration of agencies, organizations such as the TT organization, and again, the great work that Gloria is leading amongst many other local organizations on the ground. However, the reason why it has been prioritized by the IASC and the ERC is that there is recognition that we owe it to the people we serve to strive to do more. And from what you've mentioned, Manisha, from again the 700 responses that you have received, from the great work that we have seen from Ground Truth Solutions amongst other organizations who have gathered the perceptions of communities over the years, it is clear that as much as the system does a lot of good, there's still a long way to go to indeed be genuine about putting people at the center of response and making them the true drivers of humanitarian action on the ground. There are good practices, good examples of good work around AAP, but it needs to be brought to scale, and we need to address the barriers, Manisha, that you highlighted head on. And we have this opportunity that we need to capitalize on with this renewed commitment of the Emergency Relief Coordinator and of the IASC, and also, of course, the critical work that the task force, the newly established task force on AAP, which is co-led by IFRC, WFP, and CHS Alliance, to build on this attention and momentum. Now, in terms of what is needed to drive system change, and you've alluded and highlighted to a few of these points already, Manisha, and so did Gloria as well. I would put them perhaps in 4 or 5 main areas. One of which is around the commitment of leaders and the will to drive change at both the global and the field levels. We have an opportunity that mentioned at the moment with this collective attention by the IASC, by the leadership, to move the dial on this issue. The ERC expressly stated that our accountability to affected people is of paramount importance, not just for OCHA as an organization, but for the whole system. And we have an opportunity with more leaders similar to Najat to drive necessary changes on the ground. I think the second set of issues, and you've mentioned that as well, Manisha, is around the mindset shift, the culture shift, and most importantly, also humility. And I think it speaks to the point, Gloria, that you highlighted, and I was again struck by, you mentioned innovation brought forward by others whom the system has looked down on. Again, issues around power dynamics, where again, there's strong perception by communities that because of the power dynamics, where the engagement is more as a favor to beneficiaries, and I really do not like this term, rather than as equal partners, but not even as equal partners, but really to flip the system to make sure that the power really lies in the hands of communities affected by crisis. And it's not about technical solutions. Technical solutions are critical. There's a lot of good done at the technical level, but it's really about changing the way we operate and how we engage with communities, making time to listen and to value the time to listen. And sometimes that means also slowing down to make sure that we get the guidance and the direction from communities affected by crisis that know what's needed, when, by who, and in what shape. And it is everyone's responsibility. And in a lot of contexts, we assume, if we have AAP coordinators, then we've ticked the box, we've done AAP, which is absolutely not the right way to go, if I can say so. This is everyone's responsibility. It is a collective responsibility of every single person that is involved in humanitarian action. I would say the third bucket, and it was also mentioned from the responses, Manisha, that you received, is the fact that we need an architecture that is genuinely inclusive, and that adapts to ensure the participation of affected people, that seeks out, listens to, and is responsive to the voices and perspectives of communities and their expressed needs. Having a system in place that is agile and flexible to better engage and adapt to the course correctors that are needed based on community feedback. And this is one of the weaknesses in the system. There is a lot of information and knowledge, and to a certain extent engagement, but I think we are challenged in terms of triaging the information that is being collected and really taking timely action to get closer to responding to what communities are asking for. And then recognizing the difference in needs. Again, Gloria, you mentioned in many cases and in many contexts, the system delivers, quote unquote, what you were mentioning, Gloria, what they thought we needed. And that again speaks to the importance of making time to listen and really get closer to responding to what communities are asking for, based on context and based also on the nature of the needs, depending on, of course, a sudden onset, a disaster versus a protracted crisis situation, amongst many other situations. And then I would say the fourth area, which is super critical, and I really hope that systems for the system to be more accountable, engaging.
You froze for me after you said the fourth area, and I don't know if it was just me, but
Sorry.
maybe you could just repeat the fourth area for my benefit, please.
Yeah, the fourth area is really around addressing the incentive systems. The humanitarian system, it's a critical system. Without it, we would struggle, and there would definitely be concerns and more suffering, around the world. So the system does a lot of good, but to be more accountable and responsive to what communities are asking for, there is need to have a critical look at the incentives that drive the system to indeed be more accountable and more engaging of communities. And here, the role of donors cannot be underestimated. We need the partnership with the donors to address this incentive issue, but also to look at how more flexible, unearmarked, and multi-year funding can be channeled to the system. Because if you don't have flexible, unearmarked, quality, and multi-year funding, it becomes extremely difficult to be able to respond to the expressed needs of communities. Last but not least, the fifth area is really around community, making time to listen to community feedback, but also the perceptions of communities. And Gloria, you've just shed a critical light, a sobering light on the perceptions, the realistic perceptions of communities, and how the international humanitarian response and the assistance being provided is perceived. As I was mentioning, many organizations, including Ground Truth Solutions, does a lot of good work through local partners to gather the perceptions of communities. And it's really important to regularly hear what communities have to say, how they perceive the response, and what more needs to be done to make sure that we come closer to engagement and responding to what they're asking for. So perhaps, Manisha, I will stop here, and of course, I'm at your disposal if there are any questions from you or colleagues online. Thank you, Manisha.
Thanks so much, Mervat. And I think it's great that you've really kind of addressed a lot of the challenges that participants had already expressed, as part of the way forward for the IASC, really kind of looking at that commitment from leadership, how we're doing that mindset culture shift, but also having that time to listen. And I think, the time it takes and then being able to adjust our programs are things we're not prior to that as organizations, or, responding too much to donor commitments. So that role that donors have, I think, is also incredibly important. Maybe, Mervat, I won't ask you any particular questions now, but I'll let you wait for a few more. And I see that we're getting some questions in the chat and Q&A, but I'll let some of our panelists come in, and then I'll also turn to you, Mervat, if that's okay. I do encourage you all to use the chat and the Q&A, and thank you, Isadora, who's one of our panelists, for already responding to one of those questions. And I see that there was somebody asking Mohammed Abdul Rahman, you were asking, do you think the AAP, I assume it's AAP and EDI are similar, or is there a main and a part? I'm sitting in Scotland right now, so EDI for me is Edinburgh. So if you could clarify what that is, because I'm assuming you're not talking about Edinburgh. But it's great to see that we've got so many people joining us from all around the world, which is really exciting. And I think the questions that are coming up are great, but I'm going to save those until we hear from our first set of panelists, who are going to be talking about Key Action 1 under the IASC Task Force's approach to AAP, which is really about accountable leadership. And Mervat, as you said, we've got this opportunity now where we've got this commitment by the IASC principals to really move the dial on AAP. So how do we really make sure that leadership is being accountable? And in the upcoming HAR, the Humanitarian Accountability Report from CHS Alliance, it does talk about the critical role that leaders have in terms of instilling an organizational culture and providing that leadership to really show that there is that movement and commitment to prioritizing AAP. And that leaders can't also ignore the structural power relations within their own organizations that needs to be addressed if we're really going to put people at the center, as you mentioned, Mirvat, because I think we often talk about it, but in the organizational cultures we have and the leadership approaches don't always necessarily reflect that we put people at the center as opposed to organizational priorities or funding priorities or what donors are asking. So in that sense, we've got two people who can talk to that, which is great. And as you mentioned, Mirvat, we've got Najat Roji, who is the resident and humanitarian coordinator for Lebanon. And I think, Najat, you're going to be able to really show us, as a leader in a country context, how you're able to really move that forward. But before I turn to you, Najat, and then we've also got Kat Skehan from the CHS Alliance, who's the collective accountability manager, who will also tell us a little bit about a tool to really measure progress. I am going to get us to start looking at a first poll that we can all have you answer while you're hearing back from everyone. So for this first poll, we've got four questions. Four in total. So for the first three, you're going to be able to mark it whether you strongly agree or you strongly disagree or shades in between. So the first question we've got is, my organization or agency or government, since we are a range of individuals here today, effectively adapts its work based on the views and perspectives of affected people. The second one is, my organization, agency, or government's leadership encourages and actively supports our engagement and collective efforts to adapt our work based on the views of affected people. So really some of those issues that Mirvat, you were talking about is, are we really responding to things that we're hearing from people, and are our leaders really pushing that? And the third question there is, I am seeing a stronger commitment by humanitarian leaders to address accountability to affected people. And then we have a longer answer for you. And this one really will be able to look at it a bit, but make sure that it also feeds into the work of the IASC Task Force. What concrete action would you recommend to make humanitarian leaders more accountable? So I'm going to leave those with you now so that you can take a look at that. And just please do remember, once you've answered the questions in the poll, please remember to hit submit or we won't see your answers. So don't forget to do that. But Najat, if I could turn to you, please. From your perspective as the resident and humanitarian coordinator in Lebanon, what will drive the change that's needed for greater accountability to people that have been affected by crises?
Thank you very much, Manisha. There is very little to add to what Mirvat said, and Mirvat and myself with other colleagues, we have been really trying to unpacking actually all the things that we need to do with full commitment. And I think we know that the commitment is much better than before. Where we have gaps, it's in the enforcement, so not to leave it as a choice or as an option, but really to make sure that everybody understands that it has to be there. And I can make a parallel, a natural parallel with all the work we have done as an organization with the PSEA. The first discussions we had about PSEA were really very much similar to the discussions we are having today and since maybe a few years regarding the AAP. And let us also learn the lessons. Let us learn from the different, the different achievement that we had as a system. And I think there is a lot there to be really, used. My experience, not only in Lebanon, but, it's the third time I am a proud humanitarian, and I will always remain a proud humanitarian. I think the leader has really a very important responsibility to lead by example. And I can give you very stupid examples, such as going to the field. It's an attitude. If as a leader, you consider that you are there just to meet with the VIPs and with the big shots, and actually don't take from your time, and you don't have the attitude for you to go and yes, sit with those people who are our raison d'être. I mean, then it's very difficult actually to make sure that the members of your country team are also, encouraged to do it. And that is not happening as often as it should. I mean, and that is really something very simple. It's really very simple. Of course, we won't go to the point where the rule will be you have to go to the field at least once a month. I think it should be more than that in some cases. It should be less than that in other cases. But that should be one of the things to assess. I mean, when you have a humanitarian coordinator who did not go to the field for 3 months, for me, there is a real problem. There is really a problem. And it does not have to be only the humanitarian coordinator. It has to be all the leaders of the different organizations and agencies involved actually in the process. The second thing, I have to tell you, I developed an allergy to hotlines. I call them actually the cold lines. Really, I call them the cold lines because hotline is for me already putting a barrier between you and the people you are supposed to engage with. You know, sorry, we have to go to their places, to sit with them, to understand where they are, and to show the respect they deserve, because that's the best way we have, first of all, to preserve their dignity, indeed, and second, to create an environment where you are able to build some trust. Have you ever seen anyone building trust through a cold line? Of course, no. And we are still so much, attached to the existing tools and so much marketing those tools. As I told you, I really developed an allergy. I mean, immediately when someone is telling me about this, I am immediately, no, stop. We don't talk about that, okay? Because that's one tool. Please don't mix between things. Tools are available and there are many. It's not about the tools. It's really about the human dimension that is critical in AAP and that is critical to anything we do in the humanitarian work. And I am afraid, under all the tools and the instrument and the processes and this, we just forget. We just forget about the human dimension, the human component. When we say we put the people at the center, it's not only sentences. It's really giving a human face to the tragedies they are going through. It's giving a human face to the lost dreams. It's giving a human face to the hopes we are also bringing, to them when indeed we have the attitude to listen to them and to take the time to listen to them. So that's for me is very important. It should come from the leader, even though at a certain stage, it should be something natural. We should not force ourselves with that. I mean, it's sad. It's really sad that we are talking about how we force this. It is sad. I will consider we succeeded the day we are not talking about it that way. The other thing which is really very important, enforcement does not happen only in democracy. Enforcement comes also with some very clear decisions and some very clear criteria. And I never hide, or is shy about, yes, at a certain stage, say, okay, we educate, we discuss, we raise awareness, we sensitize, blah, 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 blah. But there is a point where, hey, guys, that's what we are going to do. And that has to happen. We are not doing it because we are a lover of authority or power. We do it to protect. And that is a duty that we should never, never, never compromise. And one tool which was really for me very, very useful, not only for AAP, by the way, but also for localization, which from my point of view are very, very closely linked, is the pool fund. This is what you use actually to start forcing a certain culture, to start forcing a certain behavior, and to start forcing a certain approach, because you just put it as an indicator, as a condition. You say, well, if you are coming up, with a clear AAP, which please is beyond the hotline, don't tell me, yes, we are going to put in place a call center, blah, 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 but really something, and if I don't see field visit and all of that, I say, well, I'm sorry, that will be a criteria of allocation and that will be a criteria of selection. So it has really to be something there. As leader, we have interviews on a regular basis. I would be very revolutionary and say that there should be a question on AAP every single time. We have to select a leader in the humanitarian arena because, frankly, If you have a humanitarian leader who is not even close to that, well, this person is not going to enforce AAP. I can speak 3 hours about that. You know?
I won't let you do that, Najat, because we don't have 3 hours, unfortunately. But maybe I could just jump in there, because there's a number of people who have agreed with you around hotlines, and that somebody called them hot illusion lines. I think that point about the tools, we're focusing a lot on the tools and not spending the time listening to people necessarily. I mean, in a way, is that also, I feel, I've been around in the system for, far too long, but I've noticed more and more with the demands for reporting that we've got, people are spending way more time behind their computers, collecting data, providing reports to headquarters, to donors. How do we really shift that dial so that we collectively as an overall sector really go back to really listening and taking the time to listen? Because somebody also pointed out in the chat, that these sort of flying visits are also not very helpful. And I think sometimes when we have high level visits to communities, they're very short and they take up a lot of people's times as well to organize them. But how do we make sure that we're getting that engagement with populations on a more regular basis? And then what are some of the ways that we can, as you said, that enforcement and assessing whether leaders are doing the right thing? How do we make sure that we're really following up and holding leaders accountable?
Yeah, maybe just to clarify, I'm not saying hotline are not. It's one tool again, but please stop bringing AAP just to the hotline. Frankly, I mean that's the first step. Why are we doing all this reporting? It's because we consider that we are accountable to the donors, right? Well, I think that the day everybody is convinced that we are accountable indeed to the people, we will do the right thing. I'm sorry to be that blunt. It takes just a serious commitment, and not a commitment only in a meeting or a commitment just ticking boxes. It's a commitment that is really translated into action. And that day, nobody is going to complain about it. I can assure you, because then this is going to be really reflecting what we believe deep inside. We are not yet there. That I can assure you. I had, and I still have, a number of members of my humanitarian country team where I'm arguing with them about why it is important that we all go to a field visit. And of course, they have all good reasons not to, of course. Why they never argue with me when it comes to a report to the donor. And I tell them, so for you, it is more important to spend time to come up with the report to the donor, but it's not important for you to take the time and invest actually to really be serious about your accountability to those population we are supporting.
Thanks very much, Najat. And I think that's a really key point, is that really shifting the focus of what we're doing and really putting people at the center is critical. And as somebody put it, hotlines are not the silver bullet for AAP. But even when we do listen to people, we need to make sure that we then are able to adapt those programs. And I think, as Mervat highlighted, we need that flexibility also from donors to be able to really allow us to have that adaptability in our programs. And maybe just one short comment that came out of the chat as well is that maybe we need to refer not to them so much as field visits, but more visiting people in their communities or their temporary homes. So it's not the field per se, but really just going to where people are living as well. But huge thanks for that, Najat, and we'll probably have time for more questions, but I do want to turn to our other speakers as we have 5 of them left and only 45 minutes left. So I'm going to ask the next speakers to be quite brief in their responses so that we can get some more questions in. Kat, I'm going to turn to you and, a little bit of how do we sort of track how well we're doing. You've been working with the IASC on a tool for trying to consider a collective analysis of accountability across the system. Can you tell us a little bit more about this tool and how it can help coordinators like humanitarian coordinators like Najat to really see how they're doing as leaders across the system?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Manisha, and thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody. I've been working with the IASC, the CHS Alliance, and myself have been working with the IASC to develop a tool that we've called the AAP Results Tracker. The AAP Results Tracker aims to bring together a full and holistic range of data that the sector collects on AAP. as alluded to by our other speakers, the challenge in AAP is not that activities aren't happening. We know that a lot is happening, but we often wonder about its effectiveness. And for resident coordinators like Najat, it can often be really difficult for them to get an overview of the AAP situation in their country. We know that feedback data is often not statistically accurate in a mathematical sense, and that we aren't able to always get a good holistic picture of what people think. And that often decisions are then, in relation to AAP, are then made relatively intuitively and instinctively based on what we think, but not necessarily what we know. The results tracker aims to intervene in that area and bring evidence and data to the decision-making processes of the HCs and the HCTs. It is not intended to take away that human element whatsoever. It is absolutely at the heart of the results tracker, is that this is information that represents people. It is not data on its own. And that's a really, really important principle that we feel very strongly in its development. And I think it's best to kind of explain that through describing what the results tracker is and how it works. The results tracker is structured around the 9 CHS commitments. And the reason for that is because we really wanted to expand our understanding of AAP beyond our silver bullet hotlines. We wanted to look at all those other areas that contribute to effective AAP practice. So we know that the CHS is a sector-wide standard that has already done the thinking around this. So we wanted to bring that thinking into the results tracker. And so we've structured the results tracker around the CHS commitments. And also we've structured it at 2 levels, so that it brings together information related to the system, i.e. what structures, policies, and processes are in place. How many hotlines do we actually have, for example? How many other complaints mechanisms and feedback mechanisms do we have? But we recognize that within the results tracker, for effective AAP practice, it's not enough just to hear about what we have in the system. We need to hear the most important information. What's people's perceptions and satisfaction of our actions? And that's a critical element of the results tracker. Through bringing together the system-wide data and community perception data, we aim to triangulate both what we do and how people are experiencing it. By providing this information in a simple and accessible way, we hope that humanitarian leaders such as Najat are able to get a quick and effective overview of the AAP situation in their country and then prioritize actions to take forward. We've so far rolled it out in a number of countries, and it's a tool that's in continuing development. So please do stay tuned to hear more about it. One other point I forgot to mention, apologies, is that the tool brings together data that's collected, again, at a different level, both between data that's collected at the global level, for example, through actors like Ground Truth Solutions or REACH. But we also recognise that a lot of information is held at the country level, at the response level. So it brings that data in together. So the tool is quite broad, it's holistic, but it really does aim to create this really comprehensive overview of the AAP situation in a response to allow humanitarian leaders and decision makers to have an evidence-based perspective on their decisions and to inform their actions. Thanks, Manisha.
Thanks very much, Kat. And that does seem like a really useful tool, despite saying we focus too much on tools. I think it's really, we need those tools to understand how we're making progress there. And I guess maybe, I don't know, Kat, if there's a number of great questions in the chats and in the Q&A as well. But I think, one of the questions maybe that I could ask you is, how do you really strike a good balance between enforcing AAP and building a culture of AAP? And is this tool going to really sort of push us to sort of see how are organizations building that culture internally? I mean, and I think, how we do that enforcement of leaders really being accountable is a whole other thing, because I don't know very many humanitarian leaders that have lost their jobs for not being accountable to affected populations. And maybe that enforcement piece that Jack, you talked about, is where we really need to be saying, when your performance reviews are being done of leaders, it's not about how much money you bring into the organization, but how much you really are being held accountable to populations. But Kat, is there something there in the tool that can help us really see?
Yes, I think there is. The tool will is the first monitoring framework we have for collective accountability. It will enable us to get a real insight into what people's perceptions and satisfaction are with the response, and to bring that into one place so that leaders can get an overview of it. At the moment, that information isn't accessible, and we aren't able to use communities' perception on the response as a performance matrix, either for our leaders or for the collective system. So this is really one of the key benefits of the results tracker. It will bring together community perception data from a different source, from a variety of sources, to enable us to really see, what do people think of our response? How are they finding our actions? Do they trust us? Do they feel they're being listened to? Do they feel that their opinions are informing the response? All of those things that were mentioned in our very first speaker, Gloria, that she didn't experience. Those are the types of questions that we're bringing into the results tracker, so that leaders have an overview at scale of what the population think of the response. And then that can be used, as you say, to hold our leaders accountable and to potentially be a performance matrix for them and the collective system.
Super. Thanks very much, Kat. And I think that's an exciting tool that will really help us to hold leaders to account. I'm going to take a quick look at the polls, and I apologize, my internet connection seems to not be great today in Scotland. It was perfectly fine a couple of days ago. I apologize for that. But here we can see sort of your organizations all seem to be doing relatively well in terms of adapting your work. There's lots of strongly agrees, 28%, 23% agreeing, 28% in between, but I think that's a pretty good push there. And in terms of the leadership, it also seems to be quite good that leadership is really supporting engagement and collective efforts to adapt your work, which is also wonderful. And many of you are also seeing quite a strong commitment by leaders to address accountability to affected people. So I think those are positive trends from leadership, but I do think, Najat and Kat, as you pointed out, we need those tools to really make sure that we're holding leaders to account, and that there is the enforcement and kind of the punishment, I guess, if you don't really hold leaders accountable. I want to shift us to sort of, and thank you both, Najat and Kat, and if we have time at the end, we may have some more questions, but we have 2 more action areas to get through. So I want to turn next to inclusive system and architecture being really incredibly important. And as many of you highlighted in the challenges that you had, we're not always being as inclusive as we should be. We're not necessarily getting affected people to the table to be able to really hear their views and participate in decision making. We're not also being really inclusive around ensuring those of different ages or genders, or persons with disabilities or otherwise marginalized populations are not necessarily getting to the table. And had been a comment earlier about, in India, the caste system is discriminating against, the Dalit and tribal communities. So how do we really make sure we've got a more inclusive system? And with that, before I turn over to our 2 speakers, we have another set of polls for you here as well. And this time we're looking at sort of, do you agree with, again, strongly agree or disagree ones. But the first one is, the current humanitarian architecture provides sufficient space for the appropriate actors and their voices. So not only about individuals that are affected, but also local organizations and community organizations. So again, the second question is, I've personally been involved in initiatives to bring more representative voices into decision-making forums? And then if you've been involved in any of those initiatives, please let us know what they are and where they're taking place. Again, a longer sort of answer that we can then provide to the IASC Task Force to consider. And the last, again, another long question, what are some concrete actions that you would recommend for global decision-making to be better influenced by representative and inclusive voices? So with that, I'm going to first turn to Dr. Henia Dekak, who is the head of policy and liaison unit at UNFPA in the Humanitarian office there, and is also the emergency coordinator for SURGE. Henia, UNFPA has been working with partners in the Asia Pacific to be more inclusive in the AAP approaches. Can you tell us a bit more about that work and what others can learn from that work that you've been doing, please?
Thank you for the question. I think from UNFPA perspective and the work that we have been doing in the Asia Pacific is really to make sure that the system is also action oriented and anticipatory as much as possible. Because how do you make sure that you are consulting with the community ahead of humanitarian response unless you really work and capacitate the community itself to be able to really respond in an effective manner and really build their capacity to be able to be the leaders that they know what needs to be done most of the time in their communities. They need also the support. So I think part of the work that we have been doing in the Asia Pacific is really working on these anticipatory actions and really involving the community in anticipatory action. And that way you are already consulting with the community and really listening to their voices in the design of the humanitarian response ahead of the humanitarian response, because we all know that situation evolve and changes in time in humanitarian setting. But the more we build capacity, the more we bring the participation and the inclusion that is needed, including people with disability, including women in the decision making, really consulting with the different communities, ethnic communities, religious communities, whatever, communities that we have to work with where we know that they have a little bit of disadvantage within the system. We really need to concentrate on the people who are voiceless and bring their voices into the anticipatory action and understand what they need to do. And I think that part of that is very important in terms of the coordination also, making sure that you have a network of agencies working together on this, not only one agency or one voice, but I think this collective system and architecture at the regional level also is very important. I think there is a lot of support and learning that can happen at the community level. Maybe agencies can work on making sure that they facilitate that exchange and that elements of working together. And I think at the regional level in the Southeast Asia, there is a good, regional network that is working. 9 countries have participated in this network, and they have really been able to fundraise at some point, making sure that they document what is working, what is not working. Unless we start documenting also, and again, tools are important. Listening to the people are important, like what Najat and Mirvat has said. But I think what is also important is we need to document and we need to evaluate and see where we are working and tracking that. That's also very, very important. But including community, including women, including survivor of sexual and gender-based violence, including the voices of LGBTQI population is very, very important in making sure that we are inclusive in our response. I know we have so many other speakers who need to speak. I want to stop here, but to say thank you so much, because this is a very important discussion. And the commitment that we did at the Humanitarian Summit and the Humanitarian in 2016 are still alive, and we should really continue making sure that we work with also survivor of exploitation, sexual exploitation and abuse, and inclusion. We cannot continue having silos also in the humanitarian system. I think at the moment the disability is by itself, the AAP by itself, the PCA is by itself. I think we need to bring all of this together in a more holistic and approach, but this is something that I think from UNFPA perspective, we want to see more traction on that, and really making sure that we build the capacity of the local organization to be ahead of the curve and not at the end of the curve. Over.
Thank you very much, Hania. And I think that point, that it's great that you've been able to bring those agencies to work together and really getting past some of that competition that we often see. And I kind of wonder, and I think also, as you mentioned, we need to bring these different sort of silos together so that we're having more kind of holistic approaches, because I feel sometimes we're very specialized often, and it becomes so many priorities for individuals and organizations and leaders that can often be a challenge as well. So really finding how to do that holistically. But maybe, Hania, you could just quickly tell us, how did you bring those agencies together and overcome that competition we often see? What was the kind of linchpin that got people working together to really listening to communities?
I think part of it is really anticipating with the community what are the issues that are coming out, where it's community visits, as Najat has said, has been helpful. And I sometimes I think the collective visits that can be done by the humanitarian community collectively, but also with a lot of female and gender participation, and really bringing the different elements into that listening. I think we can bring the organization together. And I think the facilitation, making the space, and I think making the space for these discussions to take place is very important. Not, at the highest level, no, at the community level, sitting with the community, listening to them, and create that space where also you bring the other organization. And I think we have done a lot of this work in Cambodia, where we brought all the other organizations together, and we listened to the community. We fundraised together to bring somebody to focus on AAP with the community and really address the PCA component also within the community. And I think creating that space and not really putting the flag of your organization, but really putting the flag of the community and the people at the center, that's what will bring it together. I don't think community by itself, it's not going to be happening, but we need to facilitate them. But putting them at the center is the most important component, and creating the space for them. I think that's the lynch for me, is that community perspective. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hania. And I think that, again, really putting people at the center is really critical. Isadora, if I can turn to you, CARE's done a lot of work around AAP and women's participation. Can you tell us, why is women's participation so critical for effective accountability to affected populations? That didn't come across very well, sorry. But you know what I mean,
Totally. So one of the things we're kind of drilling down through this conversation, aren't we? We're going from the theory of change to we've gone down to the results tracker, and now we just heard about looking at the community. And one of the things that we need to be really aware of as we do accountability to affected population work is really the need to make sure we're accountable to everyone. And that's going to mean that we need our AAP systems beyond hotlines, absolutely, that take action too, but we're going to need to take some steps to make sure that marginalized voices which have historically been excluded, can be heard, and that their voices count too. And one of the largest groups that we work with at CARE on this is with working with women and girls. And so we have an initiative called Women Lead in Emergencies that I'm going to share a little bit more about with you today, Manisha.
Sorry, I lost my mute button. I mean, in that sense, what are some of the kind of things that have come out of that work that you've done for it to work so well when you're bringing women in? What is it that Women Lead in Emergencies work has shown about what difference can women make in terms of decisions, or making sure that organizations are accountable to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I cut out?
No, you did. So
okay.
What difference does it make? Well, one of the things we're seeing is that when you take concrete actions in addition to your AAP systems to work with women and girls and with other groups who have been marginalized, you can have really incredible results. But you do need to take extra steps. Simply having those spaces and expecting women and girls or marginalized communities, people with disabilities, to just start participating is unlikely to get you the results you want. What we've done with Women Lead in Emergencies is really challenge ourselves and challenge the system a little bit. And thanks to some very flexible funding from many traditional donors, we've been able to work really differently in a way that really starts to explore. And we're actually doing this work where Gloria used to live in northern Uganda with South Sudanese refugees, to explore the barriers to women's participation and to look at what do they think are the promising opportunities for their future engagement and participation. And really importantly, as you go through that analysis and understanding what's happening from their perspective, both within the humanitarian system, the local governance system, the traditional system, we're then be able to identify groups of women, ordinary women. These are very grassroots organizations, not even organizations in many cases. So it could be a church women's group, it could be a milling group, it could be a GBV survivors group. But we've identified these groups of women who want to take action in their community, who want to have a voice. And the most important thing is that they have budget through Women Lead in Emergencies to put the things that they think are important into practice. So it's not enough to just hear from women or from any community, to be honest. You have to then, as you said, be able to put that into practice to transform your programming, but in ways that they want. And that's really the most important and transformative element of Women Lead, is actually having dedicated budget that's completely open, and that women's groups themselves decide these are the things we think are going to make a difference in women's lives and in women being seen as leaders in this community. It's really the action that we've seen has been the kind of heart and soul of the transformation we've been seeing. And we have seen some really transformative results from this initiative, and it's taken place in more than 11 countries. So we're really looking forward to scaling it with everyone. It's not just a care model. We'd love to share it with everyone right around the world.
Thanks very much, Izzy. And I mean, maybe you could drop a link or so into the chat so people know how to be really working with that model, or if there's any elements that you'd want to be able to share there, I think would be great. And I think that point you just made around having access to budget is a really critical one, but also one that very nicely moves us into our third action area on quality resourcing being available. And I think it's really important to think about resourcing not just being about financial resources, but also about the human resources to be able to do the work. So thank you, Henia and Isadora, for that. I'm going to now move us to our last two speakers, definitely not least, around quality resourcing. And first of all, I think if one of the questions that did come out in the Q&A, I'm just trying to find it again now, there's lots of great questions, and now I've lost it, one moment, was around kind of donors having requirements around AAP. And now I've lost that question, but maybe when we're thinking about resourcing, how can we really be thinking about, oh my gosh, I've lost it, I'm so sorry. How do we make sure that most major donors have requirements around AAP? How can these be made more effective as we're really looking at those resources? And before I move, I forgot to look at the poll results from the second section. So let me just go back to inclusive systems and architecture, I apologize. There we've got quite a bit of strong agreement around personally being involved in, hang on a second, I'm looking at the wrong poll. 1 second, here we go. The current humanitarian architecture provides sufficient space for appropriate actors. Very strong disagreement, and it's at the bottom end of the scale really. So 22% strongly disagree, 40% disagree, and 25% neither agree or disagree. And only 6% and 7% strongly agree or agree. So really the architecture, we've got a lot of work there to do in terms of really getting more appropriate, more space for the actors and their voices in the system and the archetypes into decision making. We have much more kind of agreement and strong agreement there, where many of you have done that. So 32% of you agree and 32 strongly agree. and 20% are somewhere in the middle with fewer there. So it's great that that those of you are working to make the system more inclusive, but we still have a long ways to go. And thank you, Marcus, for reminding me about the polls. So now moving to the third one on quality resourcing. I apologize there. We've got there two speakers here from the START Network and MOPAN. And before I turn to them, we do definitely need those resources. So again, would love to hear your thoughts in the poll again on resourcing. Here we've got humanitarian action can never be accountable without more dedicated human and financial resources to AAP. Do you disagree or agree? And the second question is around AAP is currently limited because of how our organizations and leaders prioritize and use resources, i.e. it's not a lack of resources, but just the prioritization of those. And again, here we've got 3 long answers, and we'll keep this one open for you so you can really provide some thoughtful answers for us, for the task team to take forward. The first one there is, if your organization, agency, or government had additional resources dedicated for AAP, how would you use them? Next, we have, what should donors do to drive a greater commitment to AAP? And the last one there is, how should organizations prioritize resources to make AAP part of their organization approach? So with that, I'm going to turn first to Ashraful Haq with the START Network, who's with Network. And Ashraful, humanitarian actors play an important role in disaster response in Bangladesh, but obviously their decisions and actions can profoundly impact the lives of those affected by crisis. So what should be done to make those individuals affected by crises part of the decision-making process of humanitarian responses? And what works to really hold those agencies accountable to people impacted by crises? Ashraful, if I can turn to you.
Thank you very much, Manisha, and thank you everyone who are listening, and good afternoon, good evening, where you're from. So I think that's very important questions. People already have mentioned about the importance of having the CSO with the right power so that they can bring out the right demand from the community. So I'm thinking okay, so let's start from, if we assume those civil society organizations are empowered enough, whether they could still reach to the communities who are affected by the disaster. So here we found the very challenging thing still is that neither we do understand their language, like the language of the community people, and neither they do understand our language. So this is a kind of language barrier. And if we really want to resolve that kind of language barrier, it's not only come and kind of hop on with the different project, the humanitarian project, development project, climate change project, rather than we need to be with them together to understand what languages they understand their problems, how they actually articulate the problems, and how they can take their own decisions, and whether they are saying the different things segregated, or that's the nexus understanding that we have, whether they have that kind of capacity to understand those things. So saying the whole things holistically is really important. Being with them always is very important, because they are the last mile people, they are the most impacted people. They are so because someone probably left them, and that's why they need some sort of very continuous support, where we are really missing right now with the efforts. That's why we are contributing them for a very short time period. And the language of confidence, language of trust is not being created. That's because of we are very short time window that we are seeing everything. So what language is created in terms of language of trust? The language of dependency. Right now, how we are seeing from the community, they are seeing us as a language of dependency. All the time they come up with that kind of, okay, yeah, so we need you people, but then we are going there with our resources, and we don't know how we can reach them very efficiently. That is really important to consider at the moment. So we see like the language needs to be very understandable from the both sides, so that we understand their problems, they understand how we want to solve them, so we can bring their problems to be solved by them at the core. Because when we are saying people at the center, but if we don't give them the power to problem, to design their problem, to solve their problem, so people is not anymore at the center. And then the second thing is like what is community is recurring at the moment. What is their demand? The demand of scientific information. What are the scientific information? Because sometimes we come up with the science, like too technical science that they can't really use. So the scientific community needs to understand what exactly the affected people will be needing from that. So, and then that needs to be translated to the scientific community, and scientific community needs to deliver that kind of very simple kind of science that can be useful for them to understand the forecast, to decide on the forecasting information, if you consider the anticipation, even the response side. So this is how we think, like we need to translate the language very efficiently with the civil society organization, with the scientific community, with the communities that are at the center. So this is how we are seeing like we can really create that kind of milieu to give them the real power to act ahead of the crisis. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Oh. And the second thing, if I just want to mention, like how we can really overcome that kind of situation. We say this like from the supply demand kind of things. So when the community would know how to make you accountable, then they could, as a service provider, the CSOs, then they feel that kind of pressure, so then they will be kind of bound to provide that kind of specific services to them. Mm-hmm. And also the communities, like they feel like, okay, this is the time period that we can get them, and after that kind of project time period, we can tag them in some way. So that's the thing are not very clear at the moment. If we can give that kind of capacity, if we can provide that kind of information, then they could probably support us and make us more accountable to them. Yeah, over.
Super. Thanks so much, Ashraful. And I think that issue about language and trust is so critical if we're really going to be listening to communities and hearing what they're saying, and then really trying to be able to respond there. Suzanne, let me turn to you. As the head of the Secretariat of the Multilateral Organization Performance Assessment Network, MOPAN has recently produced a report on how the business model needs to change to ensure commitments are actioned. What are the top 3 headlines from this report, please?
Yes, well, thank you very much. And thank you to you and to Manisha. And I think, it goes without saying good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone on the line. And for me, it's quite a pleasure to engage with this policy community. I think I was just saying to a colleague that my learning curve is steep because there are many, many acronyms. So I'm catching up on that. And I hope we also we should think about this in the context of engaging with the affected populations. So I would like to give you a quick perspective on MOPAN, actually, so that the participants sort of have a perspective as to why I'm here. And MOPAN stands for Multilateral Organization Performance Assessment Network, and it is about accountability, building trust in the multilateral system and the institutions that are part of that system. So basically what we do is that we monitor the performance of the multilateral institutions on behalf of the 21 largest donors. So our members, sort of to give you a sense, they represent 86% of all humanitarian funding to the multilateral system. So that gives you sort of a sense of who is behind us. And overall, it's about 63% of all humanitarian funding. So concretely, what we do is that we produce assessments of the multilateral organizations, and they provide a sort of a multidimensional snapshot of the performance of the institutions. And including, we try to sort of unpack sort of aspects on performance on the AAP. So over the past 5 years, we've been covering 43 assessments, and that also we have development organizations, but also humanitarian organizations. So from our work, what we see is that performance expectations placed on humanitarian organizations may not be fully perspective with sort of the evolving expectations for performance of the system, which are of course promoted by the system reform commitments, and specifically accountability for humanitarian funding to humanitarian organizations should really rest on a shared understanding of what constitutes good organizational performance for humanitarian organizations. So we sort of took a look at our assessments and of the organizations we've done so far, and we took on to push the understanding somewhat a little bit further and to explore what would good look like in the organizational effectiveness of humanitarian organization. And my colleague, Rachel Scott, she's sharing you a link to the report, which we are launching today. And so in addition to AAP, we have also covered the development peace nexus, localization, and also sort of unpacked some case studies of OCHA, UNHCR, UNICEF, and FAO. So specifically on AAP, we found that multilateral organizations really have, of course, made significant commitments to AAP, which we are now talking about, but without sort of the corresponding shifts to their business models. So, of course, progress will not be as bold as it could be. And some of the specific challenges we found, which many of you have already sort of spoken about, so it's good to sort of see we are not totally off topic. So it's on one hand about really ensuring a meaningful participation, and that's really that's foundational to AAP. Another challenge is about sort of how we've set up cluster coordination, so which is currently divided along sector lines, and which actually runs a bit contrary to sort of the holistic perspective people perceive and articulate their needs, and then will then distort the consultations, but also the resource allocation decision. And there's the question also in terms of challenges about the proliferation of the consultation mechanism, which of course many of you have also touched on. And then I think sort of particularly for this sort of segment, the funding constraint challenge is something we sort of revealed. So that's about a lack of dedicated resources for AAP, and also a perception that donor, they value AAP less than financial accountability, technical quality, and value for money. So our main message is that the AAP reform commitments really needs to be hardwired into the organizational structure and the business models, but also in the funding partnership with the donors. So naturally, it goes without saying we are keen to sort of continue sort of our exposure and our engagement with the humanitarian policy community, and this is particularly important that because we are embarking now on an initiative to sort of make our frameworks of how do we assess performance of organizations, but to make it much more fit for purpose for the humanitarian organization and the organizations working in a crisis context. So over the next year, couple of years, we'll be piloting an enhanced approach to the assessments, our upcoming assessment of IOM, UNHCR, and RCRC. So I'll really sort of value that we keep our channel of communication open, and we'll be engaging much more proactively as we go forward. And then I would like to just sort of round up quickly by saying that MOPAN has been in business now for 20 years. And so we're graduating, moving from home, we can say. So I think that this year is sort of a year of celebration, and in December we'll be sort of marking that effort we've been making to really sort of build that trust in the system at our high-level event in Geneva, and we'll really be keen to welcome also the humanitarian community in those celebrations. So, well, thank you, Manisha. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
and
I can. And I hope you can see me and hear me this time.
Yes,
I've switched networks. I've gone to a Swiss
I'm sorry
network.
for you.
I'm sorry. I think really Friday afternoon, the network, they've all gone on holiday. But really, thank you so much, Suzanne. And I know there's a few questions around sort of how the MOPAN criteria and methodology and the assessment there might be aligned with the core humanitarian standard. But I also realize we've only got 2 minutes left, unfortunately. So perhaps you might be able to answer some of those questions in the chat or in the Q&A, because I want to just quickly take us to the polls. However, maybe I am not a co-host, so I can't see them. There we go. Thank you very much. So in terms of how AAP is, how humanitarian action can never be accountable without more dedicated resources, a lot of you agree or strongly agree, I think there. So less agreement. So really needing to have more dedicated resources is one of the things that you see very clearly coming out. We've also got this point about how it is currently limited because of the lack of prioritization. Again, the majority of you see that either agreeing or strongly agreeing or being somewhere in the middle, but really that prioritization is critical for us as well. And I do encourage you to please answer those longer questions so that we can share those with the IASC Task Force. A huge thanks to all of you. I know we weren't able to answer all of your questions. I'm sorry about that. We had a lot of speakers and a lot of poll questions, but I think the conversation today has really highlighted that we have an important opportunity at this moment, given the dedication from the Interagency Standing Committee leadership, to really shift the dial, because as a number of you noted, we've been talking about this for the last 20 years or so, about how do we put people at the center? How do we make this a priority? Yet we're not really seeing that impact in reality. So really, how do we use this opportunity and the work of the IASC Task Force on AAP to really move us ahead and put those words into action so that we're really understanding what it is that communities want and need, that we're holding leaders accountable for making sure we're putting people at the center, that organizations are making those cultural shifts within their organizations, really shifting the mindset so that we listen to what people are saying, those who are affected by crises and conflicts, so that we adapt our programs, that we involve them throughout the program cycle, that we've got that humility to really listen to what it is that they want and need, because they have rights, they have agency. We mustn't forget that. And I think really making sure they've got access to the information that is necessary is critical. Having leaders be held accountable so it's not optional for them. Accountability to affected people is not negotiable. It's really something that has to be held to account. And we need to really be shifting the way that we're working collectively as organizations to ensure we've got a system that is inclusive, that brings the voices of affected populations, but also of local organizations to the table in terms of decision making, not only in country, but also at the global level, is incredibly important as well. And I think really, how do we make sure that we've got the resources behind everything we're talking about will also be critical as well. So I think there's lots of things. And I think today has been sort of a bit of an introduction and a bit of a teaser to the work that the IASC Task Force is going to be able to carry out. And I think looking at some of the results also, Suzanne, that you were talking about from that multi-organizational assessment will be critical for us to be thinking about as we move ahead. So I think really calling on all of you to engage sort of in the work that the IASC Task Force is doing, sharing your views and ideas with that task force so that they can really start to put things in place, that we see a shift in the next year or so, and that putting those commitments into action will be critical. Huge thanks to all of our panelists today. I know some of them had to leave, but to Gloria, to Najat, Kat, Mervat, Henia, Isadora, Ashraful, Suzanne, but also to all of the organizers and hosts of the event today. I think we've got a slide that shows everybody there. I won't list them all. Also, thanks to our captioner, Joelle, if I remember correctly. I apologize for that. But huge thanks to everyone, and apologies for going over a little bit, but really looking forward to the work that the task force under the leadership of WFP, IFRC, and the CHS Alliance is going to be taking forward. So I think lots of excellent ideas that came out today, and really looking forward to hearing from all of you as the task force moves its work forward. Julia, sorry, thank you, Julia, our captioner, and PHAP for all the hosting as well. So thank you very much to everyone, and I wish you a very nice rest of the day wherever you may be, or evening or afternoon. Thank you all.